Hi guys.
Hey, how's it going?
We are back.
Once again.
I'm Jen.
This is James.
And we are the Bennetts. So we have some interesting, conversations. Typically, we just want to put a disclaimer, we are not experts. And we don't give advice.
Mm-hmm.
We just have conversations, healthy dialogue. That's what we do. So today we have an interesting conversation. So, Honey Bun, what's the conversation?
So our conversation today is with regard to family dynamics and, of course, relationships all in one and together. So I think that's really cool that we get a chance to talk about this because honestly, I mean, who doesn't have family? Everybody has family, whether you're estranged or whether you're not, whether you're close. It all plays a role in relationships, and so I think that it's really cool that we talk about it. Be that as it may, by the way. So speaking on dynamics in family, there is something I think that I like to talk about, and we are not at all in any way being sponsored by this company, but called The And. I really love it. I just happened to see on YouTube Skin Deep, which was the name of the channel, I believe it is, and they had these, so my wife and I, we definitely tried them. I love them. I love them so much that I got all of them. They got the Friends edition. You get a chance to talk to your own friends. You get your co-workers that you can learn more about them. I have healing, which is very important, especially when you're dealing with, your own personal traumas, things that, you are dealing with and you probably don't know how to put the words to, being able to see how you feel. I think that's really cool. Strangers, if you ever wanted to have just a regular random conversation with somebody, that's something that
That's interesting.
like to do. Of course. And then of course there's the couples, self edition. I haven't tried that one yet. I am actually interested to see what this one's about.
The couples editions one, we really did this one. It was really nice. And also the family.
Yeah, family. We have that
family
one as
edition.
well.
Those have been, I guess, most beneficial. At one point, we were doing it like a night, like 10 questions a night. It just helps you stay connected. Like for us, stay connected. If you're disconnected or you weren't ever connected, it helps you get connected, stay connected. It's just a good, healthy dialogue.
Yeah, I really loved it. I thought it was really cool. And also when we would do family get-togethers, sometimes on Zoom, we would actually throw it out there, and it was actually really cool. We got to learn a lot about each other. And then of course finally racism edition, which I think is actually really cool, especially in light of Black History Month. I think that it's really cool to be able to talk to somebody who you may have a different point of view, perspective, or social economical background on, and be able to have those hard but very enlightening and needed conversations. As you can see, of course, our shirt that we got is built by Black History, us being, obviously, clearly have African American descent. I think it's really cool, that we do take the opportunity to learn more about our culture, being that, we are of African American descent. But be that as it may, that was our little plug, 2 cents.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. And again, we're not sponsored by any of the company. We weren't asked to talk about it at all. I just really thought it was nice, considering that we are talking about family dynamics and being able to learn about
And those are good tools.
very good tools at all. But anyway, so what are a couple of the things that we typically deal with? There's so many different families that you always hear people talk about your in-laws.
Yes. It's mixed reviews.
Yeah. Sometimes you get some people who have great reviews, they love their in-laws, and then you have some who
do not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. It's not always the best types of relationships, and so I think Yeah, but it can. I think ultimately it really takes place. I mean, as long as you're able to work on your relationship with your in-laws, and it definitely goes both ways. It can't just be you working on it and they're just making you do all of the steps. It certainly goes both ways. But if both of you are willing to work on it together, you can have a really good relationship.
And how that dynamic affects your marriage, because the thing is, when you get married, you always hear, when you marry the person, you marry their family, which you do. It doesn't really work as well unless everyone is copacetic. Because you can't, divorce your family, you know what I mean? And at the same time, it's like your spouse comes first, but you still love your family. So it puts that person into a very awkward position when families don't get along, when the family and the family that they came from and the family that they created, when they don't get along, it makes it that much more difficult.
And it's weird because depending on the type of family you're with, a lot of times family expect you to choose them. And being that you're married, there is certainly a responsibility to your family. Let's not ignore that. However, when you are married, you are now responsible towards each other. So that requires you, sometimes needing to stand up for your family, being your wife or your husband, family that you create, and it's not always something that leaves a happy taste, in your mouth. So, I mean, there have been, I don't know, countless examples of that,
I just think that making sure before, when you're in the dating process, I feel like vetting that relationship and kind of understanding that family dynamic, how it fits into you and how you're going to fit into it, I feel like those are good ways to kind of determine, while you're in the dating process. Because when you're married, it's too late, you're in it. But while you're dating, I think that's part of what you should be looking at, is what does that family dynamic look like? And then we can get into the different kinds, for instance, the whole, daddy's girl, or the mama's boy, or even just, toxicity, where there's a toxic dynamic going on, or codependency. It's so many different variations. From my experience, it's the mama's boy situation, it can be very, very codependent. And it's typically from my experience, it feels like the mom kind of makes the son her spouse, so there's no room for the wife to be a spouse, because the mom is kind of taking over that relationship.
And it's how do you actually even tackle that type of conversation? Because it's do you talk to the mother, or do you go and talk to the husband or
but is
wife?
The mother going to be receptive, though?
Will she be receptive towards you?
She's going to be receptive.
Or will he be receptive towards you? If you are the husband, and your wife is the daddy's girl, he's always used to being in her life providing, and now it's your turn to take that role.
The dad is kind of not, stepping away. So it's difficult for you to kind of take your position as the husband, because he's kind of in that space.
Do you think that you, as the husband or as the wife, are responsible now to go and talk to the parent in order to sort of to solidify your place? Or do you think that it is the spouse's responsibility to, in effect, reach out to their parent and say, no, we're not doing this? Or is it both? I want to see your comments below. I'm very interested to see what you think. Or do you think also, as it relates to, if you are, in my case, the husband, is it my responsibility, because I am supposed to be the man of the house, or is it your responsibility?
Me personally, I feel like if there are issues with your family, I feel like as the spouse, it may come off a different type of way. And at the end of the day, this is still your family, and you know how to communicate with them. You know how to appeal to their better nature. You know how to deal with them, because how I would deal with them may be different than you would. And who's to say that they would even be receptive to what I'm saying anyway? So that's why I think that's where it comes in, where I feel like the spouse should be the one to kind of handle that situation. You should take the point on that and be like, well, I'll go and I'll talk to them. You told me that you were uncomfortable with this. You told me that you didn't like this, or you told me this. Then I feel like that's the responsibility of the spouse to go and speak to that. I don't think it's a man-woman thing. I just think it's your family. You know how to handle your family, and I don't want to cause dissension between you and your family, because what if I do go and say something and then we get into this big argument? So now you're in the middle of it, you know.
Yeah.
When you could have kind of took the point on that and kind of been like, okay, smooth things over, you know, get your point across, but at the same time you still kind of keep the balance in order.
I think what you're saying is very true. I always, but as you guys will continue to learn about me, I always like to play devil's advocate as well, because there's nothing is ever black and white. You know, there's always that gray area, and it being that there is a gray area, I think that the reality is as well, you have some people who may not know how to communicate to their parents. So if those people don't know how to take or communicate with your parent, you know, whether it be because you have grown up in a family dynamic where it's always been mom or dad says this, and I have to follow
that.
You know, that whatever that is, that structure is, and it's been difficult for them to kind of get out from under them, you know, because they've been so, you know, it's almost like regression, you know. As an adult, you can grow and, you know, and develop, but then for some people, when you are back around your parents, you tend to regress into that child.
That you go back to where you were in that time.
Yeah.
Because neither one of you have really kind of moved past.
Yeah, or spoken
that point
about
in that relationship.
And it's this, you know.
So it becomes a child-parent relationship from an authoritative perspective, instead of I'm an adult too, and you are still my parent, but I'm an adult and these are my thoughts, and you know, as a parent, you should just respect those thoughts. Exactly. It becomes kind of like a authoritative, like, well, I'm still your parent and you're still the child. And I think if you're in that situation, I think that's what makes it more complicated, because you can't talk to your family, your spouse doesn't want to talk to your family.
But see, that's where I did. That's why I said.
So you think the spouse can?
I think that the spouse can, in certain instances, most definitely should speak on behalf. Whether it's the wife or the husband, because like I said, sometimes they have their own struggles that they're trying to get over, and you know, yes, it should be their responsibility to take point to be able to communicate to the parent, but sometimes it's not as easy as just doing that. And where, you know, let's say you are able to communicate better than I am, like my thoughts better, you can convey my thoughts better than I can convey them. You know, do you think it would be fair, you know, knowing that you're able to convey my thoughts better, to just simply sit there and let me struggle with that, instead of just stepping up and saying, this is what is the problem, and this is how we need to.
Well, what about doing it together then?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you could do it together.
Maybe if you're in that situation, I feel like maybe that's something that you can probably work on together.
Or in an abusive situation, some parents are simply abusive, you know, and so if those parents are abusive, I mean, I think that as a husband, it is, you know, it definitely can go both ways, where a wife becomes protective over the husband, or the husband becomes protective over the wife. But I think in my idea or my mindset, I think that oftentimes as a man, you know, my desire and my innate desire to protect in that type of way is much stronger than perhaps how your
I think that I have the propensity, speaking to myself,
Well, yeah,
I have the
propensity, yes.
propensity to be just as protective emotionally. I mean, I do think that it is your innate, desire to be protective, and that includes physical, emotional, as long as we're under your covering, I feel like that is your position. But I do think that wives can be just as emotionally protective as well. Because it's things that I may foresee emotionally that you may not. And because I foresee them, I'm like, let me get in front of this because I don't want him to feel that. And that's protection.
And I agree, but that's why you're essentially, I guess, backing up then what I'm saying, why I don't necessarily believe that only that child of the parent should then
your stance is, okay, so let me understand. Your stance is period. Like, whether you can articulate or whether you cannot, you feel like the spouse should still be there regardless.
I do, because you are now a part of that person. You are that person's partner now. You step up together as a part, as a unit, and I think that you are more likely to establish your point, that you are a unit if you do it together. Now, it's not always that simple, I know, because again, sometimes people have tumultuous relationships, where, you are the wife or the husband, and you try to talk to the in-law, and they're like, I'm not listening to anything you're saying. You're not this family.
Because you have to make sure that they're also a respecter of the marriage or of marriage. Because you do have some families who are like, you are not my family just because you're married into the family. Because they have not accepted that once you're married, you're one. Like, I am the family. I am part of the family. You are a part of my family. We're family. But some people don't kind of bridge that gap. So I think that's where I'm coming from, where I feel like maybe the spouse should go and handle their family. Because I think sometimes you will get into these situations like those families where they're like, when you're talking, I don't want to hear it because you're not my family. Because in their mind, you're married into this family. You weren't born into it. So if the person is born into it, it's like, hey, this is a problem for me. I don't like this.
But it's even, and it's tough, however, because while that person should certainly step up, there is the dynamic of, are they the older or younger brother or sister, or child, in the relationship? Because if they're the young, I feel like if you're the youngest son or daughter or sibling in the relationship, it can be more difficult for you if your siblings and family are not on board with your marriage, because they're going to try to interfere more likely and not take seriously what you're trying to say.
Well, it depends on the youngest. Because speaking as a youngest, I consider myself the rebel.
I'm the rebel, but I'm the middle child.
Yeah, I'm the rebel. I don't really. I feel like out of me and my siblings, I'm more likely to say something than maybe they even would. So I just generally think it depends on personality as well. I do think that, order of birth matters, but I think it also depends on who you are too. Because if you're a person that is like, no, I'm just not tolerating that, or I'm just not doing that.
If you're more inclined to just be like that,
like
where it's like you don't care what anyone else is saying, I know who I'm with, and you guys, and again, this is under the understanding that you're in a good relationship, because there are bad and toxic marriages.
Your family, I like that you said that, because the flip side of the coin is perhaps maybe your family is right. Perhaps maybe your family is like, hey, this marriage or relationship is toxic. This is not good, and it's not where you should be. So I do think I kind of agree with what you're saying too, that it has to be a good relationship and in good standing, because if it's not in good standing, or if it's not a good relationship, I feel like your family at that time, not that they should be rude to your spouse or something, but I do feel like depending on what's going on, especially if you're talking about abuse or something, your family should be intervening. Your family should be.
Because if you're trying to be the Bonnie and Clyde, so to speak, the world doesn't understand us, it's just us too, but then he's hurting you or she's hurting you, because abuse goes both ways. and don't stay in that, and if your family is saying, hey, look, this is what we see, we care about you, we love you, and we find that you're more unhappy than you are happy, and there's no type of indication of change, and especially if it's physical. Certainly emotional is absolutely important, but once you're in that realm of physical, first off, get out. And
either one, even if it's an emotional.
Even if it's emotional, because emotional is just as damaging. And the scars you can't see are the ones that often stay with you for a lifetime if you do not get the proper help and the proper counsel and seeing a psychologist or a therapist. But that being said, that then brings us to the next side of that, which is, okay, fine, in what ways can a family, a tumultuous family dynamic actually damage your relationship?
Oh, yeah, that I feel like it can really drive a wedge between spouses, because what if the spouse is taking their family side? Now you're isolated and you're all alone and you don't feel like you have anybody, and so and then let's add into the fact that perhaps maybe you moved in an area where it's just their family and now I'm really alone because I don't have my family, I don't have anyone here. It's just because I've seen those situations happen where people will get married and then they'll move with the spouse, and then the spouse's family is there, and it's just them, and so now it's kind of like a gang up situation, because my spouse's family, my in-laws, they don't like me, they don't accept me, and then my spouse is like, oh, you're tripping. Yeah, it's not what you think. Whatever. They don't kind of validate. You're like, hey, I feel isolated here. So it's like you kind of are to yourself, by yourself. So that's an easy way to kind of, draw the line in the sand, so to speak, where it kind of bridges that, takes away. And it's like that definitely can cause separation. And I also think another thing that can cause separation is it just a mental strain of trying to deal with a family that you're not getting along with or you don't see eye to eye with. The mental strain alone can start to wear on your marriage, because even if, let's say, the spouse does support you, they're sad because their family and their spouse is not getting along. So that, they have to stand up for you, or that's in their mind. It's like, I have to stand up for you because you're my spouse, but I'm not happy about this situation. So that does bring some sort of mental strain, because I would think like, man, if I would have never gotten married, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. That would have been my mindset. If I would have never got married, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Not that you don't want to be married to that person, but you just don't want to deal with the situation.
Yeah, it's tough, man. And I thoroughly agree with you. Because it reminds me of one of the TV shows that we like to watch, which I'm not going to say the name of, but when you're dealing with an individual who is essentially manipulating the entire the relationship, so to speak, between a family.
Oh yeah,
and when you're allowing that person to manipulate even you during the family, because it goes both ways. Yeah, it can be that the family is certainly in your marriage always talking through, if family's always like, hey, we don't like this person, we don't want this person, we don't want you to work, and if you're going through problems and all they're ever doing is just pointing out your problems, but they're not pointing out how to help you to overcome those issues, that is a terrible and lonely situation to be in. And yet on the flip side of that, if that spouse, he or she is at a point where they're like, well, I just don't like your family, I just don't want you to get together, I just don't, you think that we should be together, I think that your family's around too much. Yeah, your family's around.
I don't want your family around. I don't like the fact that they're always doing this. So, yeah, because that is the flip side. Yeah, because I forgot about that. That is the flip side. You could have the spouse that has a problem with your family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like now the spouse is kind of drawing a wedge between you and your family because they're like, oh, I don't like your family, or I don't like the dynamic of your family. Which is why this just goes back to my original point. Gather information while you're dating about this family, about the dynamic of the family, about what this person thinks about family. Because what that person thinks about family also can stir up and cause issues within the family. If your family dynamics do not align, or even how you think about family. Because sometimes you have some people who they're like, oh, I don't have a good relationship with my family, so I don't really deal with family. I don't want to go to your family reunion. I don't want to be around your family. I don't want to do that, because in their mind, they're like, this is not normal.
That's
to me,
red flags.
This is not normal. If it's red flags if you're not on the same page.
If you're not on the same page.
It can be. If you're not on the same page, then that can be something that you want to look at. And maybe that's something you can, get counseling for. And they can work inside if they want counseling. They genuinely just don't understand the dynamic. They genuinely don't whatever. But you discuss it. Like, let's say that you get to a place where you're getting serious. I feel like that, and you see this. You see, like, okay, there's something about this that I don't really know if that's going to work. And you express that to them. And then they're like, well, I just don't know. I don't know, because I've never had that family dynamic. I don't know what that looks like. So I feel like that's a good space to be able to get counseling and see if you can really work on that. Because maybe they just need help along the way to understand that. And then that will avoid these issues later on where they're like, oh, your family's over too much. Oh, you hang out with your family too much. You do this, you do that. Because maybe that was something that you probably seen early on, but you just ignored it. Like, oh, when they get to know my family, they'll love them, and sometimes it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to be able to sit down and actually have a conversation, because I don't think that family is necessarily always just doom and gloom as it relates to like they don't like you. It might just simply be that your family just don't talk. You know what I mean?
Or misunderstandings.
Or misunderstandings. But I guess what I'm getting at is, it's important to try to establish a relationship where family try to communicate more, because again, sometimes they don't, and if they just don't,
and how? Because communication styles can differ.
Communication styles matter, but the thing is, if you do not take an opportunity to have those conversations, with your family about how you grew up, what is the family history, what does that look like, what were the past family traumas that occurred, it will be difficult to truly understand the person that you're with, because, I do believe in there being an idea of like, I don't want to say like family curses, so to speak, but like generational curses, so to speak, meaning that the things that your family might have struggled with for generations, because they did not address those situations, they continually repeat the same cycles, one way or another. And because they didn't talk about it, say, well, mom or dad didn't deal with this, and they didn't want to talk to me about it, now I find that I'm doing the exact same thing that they were doing, where I could have easily broken the generational curse by talking about it and then stopping that particular thing.
And it also gives you information on that person while you're dating, because the thing is, some of these family curses, they can affect your children.
Oh yeah.
And now you're having these kids and you're like, what is going on right now? Like, I know a story where this young lady, she was dating a guy. She didn't know that his family suffered from mental illness.
Oh yeah.
She had no idea that, this family had suffered from, it was a generational thing. The guy even had it, but she didn't know because he just hid it very well. And so she had a baby by him, and this baby had so many mental illnesses. Yeah. Like a lot. Like, it was so bad that she literally had to commit him, because that's, how bad it had gotten. But the thing was, if she would have known about that, maybe that was something that they could have discussed. They could have talked about. They could have planned for. They could have, whatever.
usually children who have or go through a level of mental illness is such a strain on the marriage, and not a lot of marriages survive that type of raising of children. Certainly there are those that do survive,
But
that's a
an
lot of
strain.
hard work, and dedication and commitment. But
And that's just one example
Yeah.
of how family dynamics can play into it, and gathering information and understanding this is, a generational thing.
oh, here's one that is interesting. So family dynamic within different cultures. That because
Cultural family dynamics.
whether it's within or out of your cultural background. So that could be black, white, Asian,
Anything.
Hispanic, anyone.
Any cultural difference.
What are the cultural differences? Because just because a person is black and white, for example, doesn't mean they may necessarily have as big of a cultural difference as, let's say, someone who may be something else. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's that background, but then there's also racial background, dynamics that play. How do you, if you are in a duplicitous, a relationship that requires essentially two people of two different backgrounds, how do you guys handle that? Have you ever had to deal with, like terrible background, like, whether it's biases that have to be overcome, because being racist is not always the same as being prejudiced. You see what I'm saying?
That is a good point.
Yeah.
And what does that dynamic
What
look
does it
like?
look like?
How do you handle it? How do you tackle it? Those are, honestly, and I keep going back to this, but I stand on it. This is what gathering information. Dating with purpose is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And that's what when I hear dating with purpose, I know people use other dating, like I'm dating with purpose because I want to get married. No, when I say dating with purpose, I'm saying gather all the information that you can really know that this is what I want to deal with or be with or do for the rest of my life.
And because you're a person and because they're a person, they will have their flaws. It's not a question.
Nothing is perfect.
Yeah, and their families will have flaws. And, so it's not a question of do they have flaws? It's a question of these are the issues that I have to deal with. Can I see myself dealing with these particular issues for the rest of my life?
Because you're family.
Because you're family.
It's not like, we don't have to talk to them anymore.
Yeah.
No,
Now, some people
family.
absolutely don't care to see their family at all. And you have to ask yourself, do you even want to be with somebody like that? Because, and there's nothing wrong with them because again, it's not, I won't say that there's something wrong with everyone who's like that because there are some genuinely, legitimate reasons why some people may be absolutely removed from their family, so you can't judge someone based off of that. But you do want to know the information and the reason as to why.
You want the background. And you want to know if they, got healing or if they, because those things can come up. They can. So it's kind of like, what is your healing process for that? How did you handle that? Can you handle, the fact that me and my family are super close knit and we see each other once a week? What does that look like for you? How does that work for you? Those are questions. And it doesn't mean you're not compatible. It just means that you're going to have to figure out if this is what you can do for the rest of your life or how we're going to do this for the rest of our life. If we do this, how are we going to do it?
Yeah. But family dynamic is such a big, it's such a very big range, a broad topic, but also reiterating the fact that, dealing with mental illness, that's a very big deal. If the person that you're with, can you handle being with somebody like that who's chronically depressed, because it's a lot, to handle that, in
mental illness
as a whole, but the thing is sometimes some people have this idea where it's like, oh, it's just only this. You know, when you're in a relationship, when you're like boyfriend girlfriend, you know,
Yeah, 'cause boyfriend and girlfriend is
seems
different.
like, oh, well, you know, I can handle that. But when you're married to a person,
It's a different ballgame because you're in and out date. Like you're literally doing life with this person. Everything that they do and everything that their
and you're
family
legally
does.
bound to that person, and that's the difference, because you'll have someone who will say, well, I'm not married, but we're living together. You know,
Yeah,
they
you
share a
still-
house
yeah.
together, and those things are fine. But at the end of the
But you're
day,
still emotionally invested.
you're
though.
emotionally
and
invested.
you still have you're living married without the legality.
the legal,
The legal aspects.
ramifications,
Yes.
you know, that are involved in that, you know, which some people say that they would prefer, except, you know, that's a whole different dynamic too. You know, some family, speaking of that, may want you to get a prenup depending on how you're raised. If you're raised from an affluent family, you know, they
And
may,
the person that you're marrying may not have been as affluent, and now they want you to, you know, get a prenup because they want to protect the
Yeah.
family assets.
but that can very well break the trust of the individual that you're, you know, wanting the prenup from, because just because a person who's, you know, a person doesn't want it doesn't mean that they want your money.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a matter of, wow, you're really asking me that question right now. You know, I thought we were bigger than, you know,
And
that goes
think
both
depends.
ways.
It does.
Prenup
For me,
is a very,
getting into the prenup thing for me.
man,
I personally, and I think that's where we have
We have
conversations
conversations.
about. Because me personally, I don't see anything wrong with the prenup. I don't. I feel like, and maybe because in one point of my life, I worked for a divorce attorney, and when it gets ugly, it gets ugly. Like really ugly. People are so in love the day of, the day they get married, but the day of the divorce, it is ugly.
yeah, I do
And
agree.
so I think that sometimes when you're hurt and when you want revenge or whatever the case may be, I feel like it's very easy to go after something that you know is important to somebody. And people that are affluent, money is important to them because that's what keeps them affluent. So it's like it's easy to go after that. So if you are affluent and you're with a person that may not be as affluent, I don't see a problem with, especially if you
So-
have things tied into a family,
Yeah.
or if you're doing things where it's tied into a family aspect, where if I divorce you, you can literally get half of my family's money or half of my family's things. I feel like, yeah, you probably should protect
So,
the family aspect.
I'm not
the family
absolutely.
assets.
I agree with what Jindai has said. I am not absolutely against a prenup in if certain conditions need to be met, right? I feel as if the problem with a prenup is, especially if your family is the one pushing it
Oh, okay, yeah.
for you.
But what
You
for
know.
what reason?
Well,
though?
like I
Are
said,
they-
it-
is it personal interest or is it just in the interest of family?
Right,
The
but
family business.
right, but I agree, and I understand, why, that may be the case. But as it relates specifically to the family being the husband and the wife, or the couple that is to be married, I think it really comes to the fact where it's a matter of trust. For some people trust is that big a deal. Where it's like, okay,
You need to
you're
trust
telling
me.
me that our relationship has boiled down to the amount of money that you made. This entire time we were together, you told me money didn't matter. Money wasn't a thing. I've proven to you money doesn't matter to me. And now that we get married, you're going to slap me in the face by saying, here's a prenup, and that I can't get anything. What if you're the one who does something wrong to me? You see what I'm saying? Now, this is where it comes to, I think, the next dynamic of the prenup being that I have an issue with is that sometimes it's unfair how it's written. Now, you certainly can make a prenup fair,
Yeah. you
but
can definitely make it
not a
fair.
lot of people go into a prenup trying to be fair.
Yeah. Well,
It's,
it depends.
Well,
I
I know it depends,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, I didn't say that you couldn't.
Oh,
be
you're
fair.
saying that
I'm saying that
wouldn't.
often the
Okay.
reason why there is such a big stigma against prenups is because of what people have done in the past as it relates to the stories of how unfair people have been. So we're in a relationship, we're married now, we've been together for all this time, you get a prenup, something happens, or certain conditions are met, you then leave me and I'm still left with nothing, although we both poured into this marriage and this relationship. And you'll have some people who will be like, well, of course not, you don't deserve anything that we got. But it's like, well, what about everything that's happened after that? This is not just because you may have more money does not necessarily mean that you're the greater contributor as it relates to the marriage as a whole.
I agree with that. And I think, piggybacking on to that, I do think that if you do go the prenup route,
you have to take
even
care
if it's from the family dynamic, I think that it should be fair. And I do think the other person has the right to negotiate that.
Yeah,
if they so choose to be like, okay, I'm going to sign the prenup, I think that it's okay for them to go get an attorney and to figure it out to make it fair if they don't feel like it.
Yeah, because now to that person, it just feels like you just have an incentive to get divorced if you don't feel like something works. You see what I mean? And so that's where that issue is. And obviously, as the child of a affluent family, you have to be able to also stand your ground and say
against your family,
because sometimes they'll say this is our interest and this is what we're going to do. That's why I love Meghan Markle and Prince.
Harry.
Prince
that's
Harry.
One of my favorite couples.
I respect them so much. Prince Harry, absolutely. That is what I consider a real man.
Yeah, he stands strong. And I think that's a very good example about an affluent family and a not so affluent person.
And she had her own stuff.
Yeah, she did, but she wasn't as affluent.
But not on that level.
Yeah, not on that level. So I do think that's a very good example of making sure that you stand your ground. Because he could have easily have been like, well, I'm just going to stay by my family and you're just going to have to, figure it out. But the fact that, he had a lot of interest, a whole lot of interest, and he kind of stood by her. So I do agree with the fact that like if you decide, if the spouse that is coming into the family decide like, hey, because you do have some families who would be like, no, you need to take the prenup as is. Like, we don't want to give you nothing. Yeah. We don't care how long.
Because the family doesn't have your spouse's interest at heart. They only want
they have the family, not just your. Because it's really not just your. It's really about protecting.
It's about the family. Yeah, but I'm talking about in situations. But let's say that it's not entirely necessarily a family investment.
Oh,
oftentimes a family will only look after your best interest as the member of that family. Mm-hmm. They're not looking at the interest of the spouse, not in the same way. And granted, I understand why, because your family wants your best interest at heart, but it's your responsibility now as that spouse to say, no, we're one and we're a unit, and because of that, you have to be able to look after the other individual. And mind you, this is if you've made a smart choice with the person that you are
because then if you're not, because then if you're with a person that's kind of agreeing with this family and all of that, before you get married, that's a good place to be in. I would rather be in that place than to already be married, because at least you can start to make some decisions to see if this is something that you're going to be able to deal with. Because if that person is not choosing you now, it's more than likely that they're not going to choose you, throughout the duration of your marriage. So I think this just, wrapping things up, I just feel like overall, just make sure that you're gathering information. That's what I did when I was dating. Gathering information to make sure that you're looking at the whole aspect, because family, you're marrying family. That's the bottom line.
And also
you're marrying family.
On this end, make sure at least from the way I see it, as being the man of the house, the husband, make sure that you do your best to, stand for your wife or your husband. No matter how difficult it is, if you're in a healthy marriage, a non-abusive, healthy marriage, and again, if you are in a situation where you are in a relationship that requires assistance, where you know that you're in an unhealthy relationship or marriage, get help, and certainly get out, because you deserve a happy relationship. And just because you've had years of marriages or relationships going wrong doesn't mean that you deserve to have that going on for the rest of your life. There are a lot of people who've been through it who are now out of it and can be happy. So can you. So anyway, please like, share, subscribe, and certainly comment below. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. We thank you very much again, and hope you all have a happy evening or day.
Bye, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for hanging out. Take care. See you next time.